Hey, Justin from Cognito Motorsports. I'm going to show you how to install our new high clearance radius rod kit or control link kit for the new Maverick R, the new Can-Am Maverick R. As you can see right here, we have this car up in the air. It's all drooped out, but you can see the stock radius rods are straight. And the issue with that is in the desert mostly, or maybe even woods and stuff, you can get some contact of rocks or logs or whatnot on those lower radius rods and bend them pretty easily. So we've created a new high clearance. This is a tubing design, trying to keep costs down for you guys. So we found that going tubing is just the most bang for your buck. Going with billet stuff just gets super expensive. So as you can see here, I'm just giving you an approximate, but we're going to get a bunch more clearance here in the important part. And again, this is at full droop. And at ride height, you're going to see the benefits there once we're all finished. But in order to do a high clearance lower radius rod, we have to do a high clearance middle radius rod as well. We got to get it out of the way so we can bring that lower radius rod up far enough to make it worthwhile for you guys to spend some money on some high clearance stuff. A couple other items here related is, since while we're at it, and I'll show you when we can get the tires off here, but we're adding some double shear brackets to the outer end of the middle radius rod, which is just in single shear stock. So I'll show you that upgrade, and it comes with the kit. So this is a turnkey kit. Now here's one thing with these new Maverick Rs. You've already know, if you got one, you've already noticed most likely that middle radius rod is adjustable in length. This is your toe link, okay? This is controlling the toe of your rear tires. Pretty cool design because your toe is staying in its appropriate relations to the chassis throughout the cycle of the suspension, okay? So pretty important that these adjustments are set right. Now, as far as I can tell, Can-Am, it seems like Can-Am is dialing in the toe or aligning these cars one by one as they come off the factory line, because we've seen a couple that are different lengths. These adjusters are different lengths. So it's really important that you gauge where your toe is set before we take this thing apart. And the way we do that is pretty easy. This car is off the ground right now, so you can see tires not touching the ground. All I've done is made a simple little gauge, literally a zip tie, okay? And I just trimmed it to length, and I marked it passenger. I've got another one marked driver, and they are different lengths, okay? All this does is I have, and I'm gonna show you when I get this tire off, but I have some a target on the trailing arm, and literally I'm gonna stick this thing in there, and I'm just gauging the distance between the trailing arm and the tire. That's all I'm using it for. Very simple. We want to do that before we take it apart. Let me get a tire off and show you some more. The tire off, come on in, you can see how I had marked a target earlier before I took the tire off. Just a piece of blue tape and literally a black Sharpie mark right in there. And that's where I'm putting the head of my zip tie. And my tire was, a 1/16 of an inch off my zip tie. When we go back together with a new radius rod kit, I'm just gonna set it the same way. Very simple. Your car should be aligned just like it was stock. If you didn't have stock stuff on there, or you don't know where it was, or you messed with it, you might need a 4-wheel alignment. You can get that done at any alignment shop. When you pull these bolts off, there's a nut plate on the back side of the frame here that's capturing the nuts. These bolts have a lot of thread locker on them, or a really gnarly thread lock. And if you don't back up the nuts, you're gonna break them off. You're gonna break the nuts off the nut plates. So there's this little pocket underneath the frame here. You're gonna wanna snake your wrench up in there with that's a 24mm wrench, and then you got a 21 on the outside, and then you can loosen it. Warning, that thread locker is pretty gnarly. So, when we go back together, we'll use some red. They got some yellow paste, so it's pretty gnarly. So make sure you back up those nuts so you don't rip the nuts off the nut plates. There's that outer link where they got this tie rod, ball joint looking thing that's just single shear, right? But in order to get that off, because this is a tapered stud into a tapered hole in the aluminum spindle, we need a little bit more room. So we're gonna get this lower bolt off of the lower outer radius rod first. So 21 millimeter on both sides. Recommend a boxed end wrench on the inside. Get it out of the way. On the inner side here, there's a cotter pin and a nut. I've already got my cotter pin out and my nut is loose. Now we've got to break that taper joint loose. This taper seat can be a little stubborn, so I'm going to get this guard out of the way, which it's got to come off anyway for our double shear bracket. So that's just these 3 small bolts. Little 10 millimeter head on them. Now I've got room to get in there with a pickle fork to kind of give it a pry. So I use the pickle fork in the sledge, pop the taper loose. If you weren't sure what I was talking about there, you can see this is a tapered stud, and that is a tapered hole, which I like the taper seat stuff. Gives a real solid connection there rather than a straight bolt in a straight hole, which will have a little bit of play. Taper seat is the way to go. We just want to add our double shear feature. Again, I didn't really like the pickle fork because it tears up the boot, but we're not going to reuse this anyway. Okay, we're going to start with the lower outer end. Now you can see I went ahead and stuck the 2 misalignments in the lower outer end there. One thing to note, this is not the same end for end. This has 2 bends in it. You've got the big bend, and then you have a smaller bend here. Very important, this has to go on the chassis side. So I'm gonna get this end in the clevis on the trailing arm. Get my bolt through it. Get my nut on there so nothing falls off on me there. You'll see I have enough room to swing it out and then drop it back in, but I got a couple pieces I need to add real quick. 2 more misalignments and then a wobble stop, okay? The wobble stop is just a big fat O-ring sized appropriately for this joint, okay? And what it's for is to keep this bar from being able to wobble on the spherical bearings or the uniballs. So we call it a wobble stop. We're gonna put the wobble stop on the chassis end. So you'll see I've got a clip end where the retaining clip is to hold the uniball in, and then I have the end where there is no clip. The wobble stop goes on the end where the retaining clip is, okay? That's important because it won't fit right on this side. So you'll see, like, I can't get it to line up. I need to rotate the uniball a little bit. You can't really do it by hand because we order these things firm, so when they break in, they don't get loose, right? So I'm just gonna use a dowel or a punch. I'm gonna rotate that thing around so I can get it aligned just right. Now this takes a little bit of fussing, but you will get it. And once you get it started there, you use a mallet to just tap. Just kind of tap it in place there. Use your dowel to get your bolt hole lined up. Okay, so now what we have here is a stainless steel hardened taper pin. So this is going to take place of that tie rod end or ball joint end on the stock outer middle radius rod. Machined here, very, very nice part, very strong, really probably doesn't even need the double shear bracket, but we're adding it just in case because this spindle is aluminum. So we've got 2 ends here. We've got the tapered end and then we got a straight end. The taper end obviously goes in the hole, but we have upsized this from a 12 millimeter thread to a 14 millimeter thread. So you see it doesn't fit right now, okay? we're gonna have to drill that hole out to a 14mm hole, and you're not drilling the entire tapered hole out. It's just the small end of the tapered hole that's opening up from 12 to 14mm, and then we're gonna mount this stud. So I realize not everybody's got a 14mm drill bit in their toolbox, but I bought this one on Amazon for 10 bucks, plus tax, and that was delivered. So you can get them pretty cheap. 14mm, when you're done, put it in your toolbox. Just take your time drilling this hole. You wanna be nice and lined up straight. So just be patient with it, a little finesse, don't push too hard. And it's pretty simple to do in about a minute. All right, so we just drilled the hole to 14mm. You wanna make, stick your pinky in there, make sure the hole is clean. You don't want any metal chips or aluminum shavings in there. Just make sure that's clear, blow it out. Make sure this tapered stud's clear. So, tapered stud goes in, flat washer included, low profile locking nut, castle nut included, and then a cotter pin. Go ahead and put that together right now. So while I was putting my washer, castle nut, and cotter pin in, I realized I screwed up, and my cotter pin hole I put sideways. That means you got to put the cotter pin in and fold the back side down. There's not a lot of room in there. If you turn so that your cotter pin hole is vertical, it'd be a lot easier to get your cotter pin in and bent over. Okay, we're on to the middle radius rod now. And this is the one that's adjustable, like the stock one's adjustable. This is a turnbuckle here. So you have a right hand threaded rod end, and then this bung welded in the radius rod is left hand thread, okay? You wanna make sure, don't worry about the length right now, you just wanna make sure that your adjustment is the same on both here. So you can see, I have the jam nut threaded against the turnbuckle, and then I have this jam nut threaded against the rod, okay? My gap here is about the same as my gap here. So I have an equal amount of thread essentially. That's where you want to start. We'll adjust for length later on. 2 more misalignments that are going to go in here. Remember, the adjustable end goes on the chassis side here. So we'll start with that. Get a bolt in place. And then on the outer end, remember we have a wobble stop. And you'll see on this side of the car, the outer end has the clip side on the inside, or the spindle side. When we go to install the other side, this bar, the next bar is going to flip around, and then the retaining ring is going to be on this side, so the wobble stop would go on the retaining ring side on this side. Since our retaining ring is on the inside, I'm going to put the wobble stop onto the stud and put it up on the shoulder there, just like that, okay? Now, this bore of the spherical bearing, this is a 3/4 inch wide series spherical bearing, is gonna locate or register on this step on this stud here. So sometimes you gotta do a little maneuvering of that, with the bar. This one I think I have set up actually pretty well. So I'm on there, I'm already started on there. Let me give it a little tap. And it's gonna go on there, no problem. Got my other misalignment, and this is where you kind of want to look around and see, is my misalignment gonna make its way on? We do have a little bit of a chamfered edge here to help you, but if it doesn't want to go on right away, don't fight it. Pull it off, rock the uniball a little bit. I'm gonna give it a little tap, see if it'll go. It doesn't really want to go, so I know I'm looking around, I can kind of see how the uniball needs to rotate a little bit. So I'm gonna rotate it a hair. I'm gonna get it back on there and I'm gonna start again. Sometimes you can stick this on right now and try and give that a go. Yeah, it popped off on me, but it looks like I'm actually lined up pretty good. And there, it's on there. Now next, we gotta have a flat washer, a castle nut, and a cotter pin. The reason we use such short castle nuts is because we don't want this hanging way out any further than it needs to, because we need to be able to clear a 15-inch wheel. So real quick though, in order to get the double shear bracket on here, I'm just gonna snug this all together real quick so it's kind of in the right position where it needs to be. So I'm just gonna use the flat washer and the castle nut just to go ahead and do that for me real quick. So I got a 22mm wrench. I'm just gonna snug that up on there, and then I'm just gonna take it right back off. Now I know my misalignments and my rod are all shoved on there. And then next I need to put my double shear bracket on. The double shear bracket registers against that misalignment, so you should not have a washer or the castle nut on yet. But in order to put that double shear bracket on, we do need this shield back on as well, so that's what we'll do next. Okay, so we've got that guard, that OEM guard back on. It's like a rock guard that helps protect the brake caliper. You want to keep it, you have to keep it, because our double shear bracket registers against it, so it needs that thickness there. So I have one bolt there, I've got one drop of red thread locker on the end. And I'm just going to get it in place here. Now I got two hands free, but that's got to go in place there, and then we got to go over that stud with that end of the double shear bracket. I'm going to get my other two bolts. You don't need a ton of Loctite. Literally, it's just one drop, on the leading thread. Very simple, doesn't take much. As well as, now we're gonna get that big flat washer, the castle nut, that thin castle nut. We're going to tighten all that stuff up right now. So when you're tightening these 6mm, and they're small bolts, so I wouldn't finish them off with a cordless tool or anything. You want to be able to feel it, and we'll give you a torque spec in the instructions. With those on and secure, you can see that bracket is now secure, and then we're going to finish tightening up that castle nut and get our cotter pin in place. And again, all of the torque specs will be in the instructions. Okay, so our main fasteners are tight. The chassis fasteners, trailing arm fastener, spindle fastener. You can see I got my cotter pin in. The only thing that's left loose on this side is the adjuster. And remember, we're gonna put the tire back on there, and then you just use that simple little gauge I made, and then you're literally just gonna loosen these jam nuts, and then you're gonna turn this turnbuckle to get that gap right, okay? So I'll show you how to do that next. But when you're done with that, there isn't a lot of room to tighten these jam nuts at full droop. There's plenty of room though at ride height. So we're gonna install both sides, get the toe set, get the jam nuts just snug hand tight, and when we get it back on the ground, we're gonna come back and tighten our jam nuts. Show you that in a minute. So I've got my tire back on, and I've got my little gauge. It's my passenger side. I had it marked. Let's stick it on my target that I had on the trailing arm. Look at my gap to the tire. I'm going to start turning this adjuster until I get the same gap as I had with the stock radius rods, which is right there. Okay. Now, one thing you want to do, just go ahead and snug these by hand. The left hand jam nut goes against the bar. Just snug it by hand. The right hand jam nut goes against the turnbuckle. By snugging it by hand, we're just taking the slop out of the threads and putting it to the correct side so that we can verify our adjustment looks good. So I'm gonna give it one last look, and I'm happy. Maybe a little bit off. So I'm gonna modify that just a little bit. Tighten my, snug my jam nuts again. Now I'm good. So getting the toe where it was stock was pretty easy. This side, other than tightening these two jam nuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the other side. We're gonna get that done, and then we're gonna set this car on the ground and show you what it looks like. It's a good example of the difference at full droop. Straight radius rod versus high clearance radius rod. Now, could we have gone higher clearance? Sure, you can. There are other companies going higher clearance than this. The problem is, at full compression, this radius rod is really close to this sway bar mount. And if you need to go any higher clearance than what we have here, you have to relocate this sway bar mount. And then you gotta usually put a longer end link in it. It just kind of snowballs. So we built this kit so that we can give you the highest ground clearance possible without having to mess with sway bar stuff. It's kind of just isolated. It's the two lower radius rods, pretty simple, and that's it. So here's your comparison side to side, stock to Cognito high clearance. Okay, so I went ahead and got the other side, the driver's side, installed now. We set the car down, so now you can see how much ground clearance we've got. Basically, even with frame, underneath this part here. There's no sense in high clearance way out here because you got trailing arm right there. So now remember, we set our adjustment when we were in the air. I went ahead and did the same thing to this side. But we need to tighten those jam nuts. I'm going to throw some lock on them first. So come on a little closer. So remember, I just jammed them by hand. So now I'm gonna loosen them up all the way to the other side, so that I can just put a drop of Loctite in there. And then I'm going to tighten those jam nuts. This time with a wrench. When you're tightening these, you don't want to turn the adjuster, just the jam nuts. Turn the adjuster when you're tightening it, you're going to adjust the toe. Make sure you hold it firm. Hold your adjuster firm and just tighten your jam nuts. Remember earlier, there wasn't a lot of room to get to that jam nut, but there is now at ride height. So I'm going to get that one tight as well. And then one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and mark these. And again, make sure this jam nut is jammed against the rod. Okay, if that jam nut is jammed against the turnbuckle, it's not doing anything. Jam nut against the rod. I'm going to go ahead and mark them. Yeah. Like that. That way I got some witness marks. If I was ever concerned that maybe they came loose, I can just look at my witness marks and make sure everything's fine. They generally don't come loose. We tested these at the NORA 1000. That's 1,300 miles of racing and not one issue. So, all in all, Cognito high clearance on your Maverick R.